I'm Stella Rabaut, and I have been involved in the legal profession for about 3 decades. My original law training was in Houston, Texas, and I spent time after that actually as an oil and gas attorney at a company called Transco. I also did a graduate degree before my law degree in English literature. So I think I've always been a lawyer and a poet, as well as a seeker from the time I began law. I also practiced as a solo practitioner for about 12 years, and I did small businesses, business corporations, and family law. I helped children who were in trouble and who had been neglected for a number of years in the courts in Houston, Texas. I also was in-house counsel for a nonprofit that was in higher education. And so over the years, my legal experience led me to be very curious, not necessarily about the kind of law, but about how we do law. And my passion has been, for maybe the last 15 years, how we sustain our spirit while practicing law. I think perhaps, and I don't often go into my pre-law life, but in answer to why I was interested in sustaining my spirit in law, I had an experience of 10 years as a Catholic sister. And so the sense of solitude and service has always been a pretty integral part of my life. And so when I chose to leave the convent and pursue law, I left that form of life, but not those values. And so it didn't surprise me that eventually, after doing oil and gas and litigating and doing a number of other things, I found myself more drawn to finding ways to work with healing my profession, the legal profession, and healing as a way of rendering service to my clients. I think I could talk about how this healing in the law shows up. First of all, how I would experience clients. And even when it was my business clients, it was so aware to me that people came to me in distress, and people were hurting, and there was brokenness, whether it was an agreement that had not been kept in the form of an oil and gas contract, or whether it was a family that was no longer able to live together and a divorce was needed, or whether it was someone who had been emotionally or sexually harassed at work. That I found that not only my knowledge of law, but my knowledge of being able to serve as a container and as a place for my clients to explore what were the underlying issues, and to explore a kind of resolution that was not just of the contract, or of getting the final details of the divorce, or getting a good settlement around sexual harassment in the workplace, but about how one could go forward, my client, afterward, and feel that there had been some healing that had taken place. So that's how I handled it with clients. I think with attorneys, I have this extreme interest and continuing passion for finding context that can provide solitude, mindfulness experiences, and a way for lawyers to find ways to be more conscious. And I believe that the healing of our profession is as important as the healing of our clients as they move through whatever the disputes or whatever the challenges that are placed before them. The retreats for lawyers and judges was a venture that I took on with the Whidbey Institute. This is actually a wonderful nonprofit organization that's on one of the islands in the Pacific Northwest. And the invitation was to come and explore lawyer as counselor, lawyer living in integrity, lawyer exploring collaboration as an alternative to competition, and lawyer as healer. And so over the period of years, there were a number of times when very different folks gathered. Judges came off their benches. Law school deans walked from the halls of their school into these settings for quiet retreats. And the thing that struck me was how hungry these individuals seemed for that opportunity to hang out with other lawyers and judges in silent settings, and then in conversations that went to levels that were different than what is the latest case law, what is precedent, how can I win at trial, but had to do more with the humanness of us all. And the comments that came, and I think in some ways I was a pioneer, because I remember people would sort of roll their eyes when I would talk about having retreats for lawyers. In fact, the last job that I had as in-house counsel for a nonprofit, the Leadership Institute of Seattle. When I left, I said I wanted to do retreats for lawyers and judges. And I think there was not a single person that looked at me and didn't say, "You got to be kidding." And I became aware of how, in some ways, people were thinking it was an oxymoron to somehow suggest that law was a healing profession, or that lawyers or judges would want to come into a place in a space of solitude, and then, having had an experience of getting in touch with their deeper values, then have conversations about how law might look. And I was not disappointed. It worked. And the comments that came many times were, I'm so glad I'm not the only person, or I had no idea of how expansive this conversation can be. And I think for many it was a way of finding support. So that was the Whidbey Institute work. I felt very honored when I was invited by the Fetzer Institute, which is in Michigan, and has funded a number of pursuits of spiritual inquiry. And they had a project that David Link, who was the dean of Notre Dame Law School, and Bonnie Allen, who is now heading up, were together working on. And they asked me if I would come and invite people to have conversations about how law as a healing profession might emerge. And so folks like Stephen Kiva, having written the book Transforming Practices, and therapeutic jurisprudence gurus, Bruce Winnick and David Wetzler, and other folks who are well known in the field that are transforming, I believe, law, were part of the conversation about what might happen and where Fetzer might go with law as a healing profession. I think in some ways they've emerged and evolved into being more focused on leadership and how lawyers as leaders can have influence. And I think for me, that experience of coming to that place, actually being paid to do something I loved so much, and to have these conversations from judges and law school deans and authors of books explore the possibilities for what might come next was a pretty satisfying professional experience. And that's when I realized that that's really where I wanted to expend more of my energies, less in the actual practice of law and delivering client service, and more influencing and in some ways trying to inspire a kind of hopefulness for our profession.